Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Metabolic Power Pair call. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Molly Guile, and I am an independent consultant with Arbonne, living in Reno, Nevada, and loving our new GLP-1 support, but also excited to hear from my friend, neuroscientist Melissa Mo Boger, about the power of combining the GLP-1 support with omega-3 and why that's so important. We've talked a little bit about protein, and I'm going to mention that as I start off. But one of the things that I want to start off with is that we have seen this supplement now for about a month. So it's really only been on the market since March 1st for most people. Some of us have been able to test it for a little bit longer. But I just want to remind you that botanical compounds really work differently than pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals are acting directly on our receptors, whereas botanicals often work by influencing our metabolic pathways, our hormone signaling, our gene expression, our inflammation levels, and our microbiome balance. And because these systems interact with each other, the effects are going to compound gradually over time. So think of it this way, it's less like flipping a switch and more like retuning your orchestra. So I want to encourage you to give it enough time. And I also want to give you just some parameters to think about how this GLP-1 support is maybe going to influence your system over time. So in weeks 1 and 2, what we're finding is that common experiences, and this is both from the research on Metaboloid and from our experience with clients, common experiences include reduced cravings, less food noise, improved appetite awareness, and people often report thinking about food less frequently. Remember, we talked about like that food noise. As you go a little bit further with this supplement in weeks 3 through 6, you should notice some changes with reduced snacking, improved energy stability because we're affecting that AMPK receptor in the body, and also better appetite control. And here is where people naturally begin eating less without forcing restriction. And then weeks 8 to 12, the studies suggest improvements in body weight, waist circumference, metabolic markers, and glucose control. In fact, some of the research said that approximately 3 to 3.4% body weight reduction over a 90-day period. That's why it's important to stick with this supplement and see the effects over time. And I'm sure Mo will help me address this a little bit. But I just want to say one more time, pharmaceutical GLP-1 drugs override your metabolic signals, whereas our botanical GLP-1 support is going to support your metabolic signals. So one is forcing the system and the other is supporting the system. Now, we've also talked a lot about the importance of pairing your GLP-1 support with protein, because the important principle in metabolic health is that you want to have fat loss without muscle loss, right? And I've done an in-body scan so I could see if that was really the case. And we know that protein is going to help you build lean muscle. It's going to improve your satiety, and it's going to stabilize your blood sugar. At the same time, the GLP-1 support is going to help reduce cravings, normalize your appetite signals, and improve metabolic signaling. So together, we're creating a powerful metabolic environment for sustainable fat loss. So we also want to talk tonight, for the most part, about how we are going to pair another important nutrient with our GLP-1, the omega-3 fatty acid. And I'm going to turn it over to my friend, brilliant neuroscientist Mo Boger, to talk about that.
Thank you, Molly. Well, I'm really excited to have this group. I call you all the Geek Squad, the Brainy Bunch, the Nerd Herd. If you get a call that says we're going to talk about supplements and you hop on, I just know that you're my bunch. So I'm really grateful that you're here. I love Arbonne's decision to come out with our GLP-1 nutrition support in light of where culture is heading on the GLP-1 story. I want y'all to know that as a neuroscientist, I have dedicated my entire life to brain health. And a deteriorating brain at any age dramatically impedes health, or it can literally mean there is none. Like that's how radically important the brain is. So when GLP-1s, particularly the forced GLP-1s, came to market, and by force, we don't mean someone's forcing you. It's that forced injection that Molly is talking about, which turns on a switch. The switch says, oh, we have more GLP-1 in our system. When that came to market, I paid a lot of attention to what it was myself and my colleagues were saying about the long-term potential side effects of reducing food consumption so much so that you might start to inhibit neurological function. This is not to say that there aren't amazing benefits to the forced injections, and we're hearing that and seeing that in several different medical-based groups who needed this version of support. I also heard it from an amazing client when she said to me, Mo, I have food hate. She didn't use the word food noise, she used the word food hate. She hated her relationship with food. It consumed her and it created a real nightmaric story for her life. Because as you know, you're eating 3, 4 to 5 times a day, depending on what your lifestyle is like. Imagine hating something that frequently and for that duration of your life. So I felt very convicted when Arbonne came out with this product that we make sure that we didn't fall into the potential, I want to say, trap or the potential very big cavernous side effects of the forced GLP-1s that have now come to bear. And one of the biggest issues is when you stop eating because you're not hungry, you stop consuming not just the foods that are not healthy for you, but the foods that are. You stop consuming the two essential, that's why they're called essential amino acids and essential fatty acids. Essential amino acids are the building block of protein, and the building protein is the building block of nearly every cell in the body. And you stop consuming essential fatty acids, which is what an omega is. And when you do that, you actually start to actually have metabolic, cellular, and neurological breakdown. What we know from the data sets now, after being a couple years into the forced GLP-1 story, is that some of the density that you're seeing in terms of the weight loss is actually, to Molly's point, muscle loss and bone loss. And that is devastating because as a neurologist, a neuroscientist, a neurosurgeon, any one of my colleagues would tell you the size of your quad muscle is 1-to-1 correlated with the size of your brain in later life. The bigger your quad muscle, the healthier your brain is. The number one indicator of brain health is the size of your quad muscle for men and women both. And what protects bone? Muscle. So here we have this group of medication takers that are decreasing protein intake, decreasing omega intake, decreasing caloric intake of both foods that would be toxic and unhealthy, as well as foods that would be healthy. And by doing so, they're actually reducing, yes, the number on the scale, but they're not just losing unhealthy fat or visceral fat, they're losing muscle mass and bone density. And bone density stories as a whole nother level, the critical output of what we're seeing with some of the data. So Arbonne had a responsibility to recognize that while these might be life-saving medication in some cases, there needed to be a safe alternative that didn't produce this version of side effects. And that is where this switch came from. Molly's description of it's not a switch, it's a dial, right? A change in thinking that we're going to upregulate your body's own GLP-1. When you do this, however, you will also slow down digestion a hair, making you less hungry, just like with the forced injections. You don't slow it down as long, though, as the forced injections. Digestion on the forced injections tends to be upwards of about 96 hours, which means food is going to hang out in your gut for roughly 96 hours on the forced injections. I like to say from tongue to tail, food should be digested within about 40 hours. The clinical studies on metabolates says that it's about 44 hours on metabolates. So there's a little bit slower digestion, but not to the point where you're having this really sluggish digestive system. And this is not to shame anyone who might have chosen the forced injection route. Again, I'm recognizing the medical miracle that for many people that is. It's just to acknowledge that when you slow down digestion, you also slow down consumption. And now you have compounded the effect of eating and then not eating and then not eating again and not eating again. And now you've eliminated the opportunity to provide protein in your diet, the opportunity to provide omegas to your diet, to the point where you're simply not hungry for anything, good or bad. And I know that's a very kind of finalizing statement because I know that that's probably a big way to describe it. But with the metabolate, you're actually not having that extended digestive, we'll call it digestive waste. And you're also not having the muscle loss or the bone density loss because you're turning up your own GLP-1 and you're making the conscious decision to make sure that the food you are consuming is protein rich and it's rich in omega-3s, omega-6, fatty acids in general. Why that matters so much is that if you're going to slow your food intake story even a little, then the time that you spend eating food has to be spent wisely. And because protein and omegas are the building blocks, they are essential for health. Those are the two things that have to be prioritized in your diet so that you can be in the very best position to have those nice, big, healthy quads, that incredible bone density, those wonderful macronutrients feed your body. So on the story of protein, it's very obvious, right? Protein has been the hero since 2023. Cottage cheese came out and had her biggest year in 2026, right? Like, man, if there was an untold story about cottage cheese in 2026, I haven't heard it because you can make cottage cheese into anything imaginable. And that was because everybody was trying to get their protein up, right? We know the value of protein. We're going to start to hear more about the value of fiber, which I'm really excited about. Fiber is going to be 2026, 2027's hero. But right now, I want to make omega our big hero because what happens when, again, you slow down food intake, you will automatically inhibit omegas because the foods that actually have omegas in it are oftentimes in our Western culture consumed the least amount anyway. We're actually one of the biggest cultures to already have omega deficiencies because we don't eat a lot of omegas and have them in our diet. So with that said, Arbonne came out with an amazing product even before the GLP-1 launch, and I love it because before the GLP-1 launch, we already had protein and we already had omegas. We understood the building block to the human body. And they came out with a daily omega that is simply a one capsule that actually goes right to the source, omitting fish as our traditional source for omega and instead getting it directly from the algae, which is where the omegas come from in the fish's diet to begin with. This is a really big deal considering the amount of omegas that are on the market by farm-raised fish. And I'm sorry, y'all, if you're eating farm-raised fish, you are likely consuming more toxin than health. So the idea is to make sure that you're consuming a natural omega. So I love what Arbonne did. They actually took these omega-3s from the algae that fish would eat. They packaged it in a vegan material, which is amazing because it's much easier to break down a vegan material capsule than it is to break down a gelatin capsule. They then inserted it into this capsule, but it can actually be opened and poured into your shakes. It can be put in your spaghetti sauce. It can be added to your yogurt, your cottage cheese. And now you'll get your daily dose of EPA, ALA, and DHA for the day. So when you're thinking about omegas, what I want you to just think about, omegas aren't just fats. Omegas are structural fats that determine how cells communicate. And DHA is essential for brain health. If you didn't know this, the brain is lined in a fatty tissue called myelin. And when there was a war on fat, we literally shrunk the brain. Fat is not the enemy. Fat-like substances that are marketed as food is the enemy. Avocados, oils, walnuts, cashews, macadamia nuts, almonds, olives, these are not the enemy. These are historical foods that we have been eating for millennia because we need them for brain health. And so are fish, and so are animal-based products. But we've sort of vilified fat in the 1980s and said, no fat, low fat, fat's bad for you. And in doing that, we started to shrink the brain, that wonderful fatty tissue that goes around the neurons and allows our neurons to create communication. So I'm really excited and grateful that Arbonne made the decision to launch the omega-3 because this one passes the blood-brain barrier. It makes its way past my blood-brain barrier into my brain to actually help to create the cell itself. So this is a structural fat and it is essential. And if you are on any version of a GLP-1, I cannot incentivize you enough with my prayer, my hope, my wishes, my wants, my lectures. Please be consuming protein and be consuming it to a point where it actually does add value to your body. Most of us should be consuming well over 100 grams of protein a day. And you need to calculate that based on protein guides, which is 1.2 grams to 1.6 grams per body weight for women. And it's higher for men. And you should be on omegas. I'm super proud also of the price point of this product because it's wild how cost effective this product is for the big bang. And the last piece I'll tell you is that one of the things I'm probably most excited about is that many omega products on the market that are made or derived from fish actually have very high concentrations of mercury. Arbonne's does not. Arbonne actually outlaws heavy metals in our products. It's one of the 2,000 ingredients that are not allowed in the Arbonne products. And that's why 17 years ago, as a neuroscientist, I made the decision to become an Arbonne independent consultant because I knew that my patients were already asking for alternatives to what was on the market. They were already asking for alternatives to what might be presented to them by the pharmaceutical industry. And they were looking to make independent changes to their health one dial at a time. And y'all, this is one of those dials. So no matter whether you're using the injectables or you're using Arbonne's GLP-1, I can tell you, I know where my heart lands and I know what I hope that you're doing, but I obviously want you to consult with your consultant and your physician. But irregardless, you have to have a protein story and an omega story in order to maintain that muscle density, that bone density, and certainly the neurological heart, lung, joint health that omegas are a part of. Y'all, omegas are even linked to depression. If you're low in omegas, you're typically high in depression. They're linked to mood, they're linked to attitude, they're linked to skin health. It's wild how important they are. And I really hope that you'll lean into this product because it's more than just a supplement. It is an essential piece of human longevity and human health. So that ends the Geek Squad dialogue for tonight. I'm so happy to partner with you, Molly, as always, and I'm grateful for each of you that popped in tonight to learn a little bit more about our GLP-1 and our omegas.
Thank you for joining us, Mo. Thank you for your brilliance. And I hope that you all will go out and share this because it will absolutely serve people in their health, their longevity. And we believe health is wealth. And we just hope you'll get out there and share it. Mo, thanks so much. Bye, guys.